Coming up on our newscast, daily COVID-19 tallies are declining across the world. South Korea is no exception as authorities make changes for a gradual shift to normalcy. This includes allowing infected people to pick up prescribed medicine from pharmacies. The cabinet approved nearly $30 million to help President-elect Yoon move the top office, clearing the way for a plan initially criticized by the current administration. At least 200 people are missing and presumed dead in Borodyanka. President Zelensky called on the UN to take action against Russia. Hello, it's good to have you with us. I'm Daniel Che here to bring the latest. Let's begin with our top story. The daily virus tally has been on the decline around the world. South Korea reported fewer than 300,000 new COVID-19 cases. As the country shifts to dealing with the virus as an endemic, distancing rules and other measures will be lifted gradually. Those who are infected can pick up their medicine from the pharmacy. Yoon starts us off.
South Korea reported 286,294 new COVID-19 infections on Wednesday. Though this was an increase of more than 20,000 from a day ago, it was still a drop of roughly 14,000 compared to what we saw last week. For 3 weeks straight, the Omicron wave has been on the decline. The reproduction number for COVID-19 last week fell below 1 for the first time in 11 weeks. Authorities on Wednesday decided to allow those recovering from the virus at home to pick up their own medication at the pharmacy. This will reduce the inconvenience of having to ask someone else to get it for them, especially for people who live alone and might not have anyone to ask. When picking up their medicine, infected people should follow some new guidelines.
We ask those infected to stand outside the pharmacy and stand 1 meter apart from each other when waiting for their medication. We will also create storage areas where people can pick up their medication with minimum contact. We kindly ask everyone to refrain from talking to others and for pharmacies to abide by all prevention measures.
And recently, authorities have allowed everyone to receive in-person treatment for COVID at local hospitals if they want to. They're trying to expand the number of hospitals that provide these medical services.
We will continue expanding the number of outpatient treatment centers for COVID-19 at local hospitals and clinics, providing in-person treatments. We will also kick off outreach treatment programs where medical staff visit high-risk facilities, like nursing homes themselves.
Nationwide, there are some 4,800 outpatient treatment centers. Authorities are shifting toward treating COVID-19 as an endemic disease, but they emphasized again that this change has to happen gradually. They also mentioned that while the distancing rules will be lifted one by one, the rules on mask wearing won't be among the first. Yoon, Arirang News.
Authorities decided to approve 100 more international flights each week going into summer and 300 more starting in July. That'll bring the figures up to about half the number there were before the pandemic as people start traveling again. Choi Min-jung provides a glimpse of what to expect.
South Korean authorities have decided to drastically increase the number of international flights as COVID-19 infections are on a downward trend.
The number of new infections has been declining for 3 straight weeks. The 7-day average for the latest week has dropped around 30% compared to the week before.
Chun announced that starting next month, international flights will be increased by 100 a week, with more planes going to quarantine-free destinations like the US, Europe, Thailand, and Singapore. Starting July, there will be 300 additional flights a week.
With countries overseas lifting virus prevention rules after passing the Omicron peak, we're expecting the demand for overseas travel to increase.
The Ministry of Land, Infrastructure and Transport says it expects that by November, the operation of international flights will have recovered to around half the level seen before the pandemic. While Korean Air and Asiana Airlines plan on increasing flights to Europe and North America, low-cost carriers are targeting Southeast Asia. In line with the expansion, South Korea's local airports are preparing to gradually expand international routes too. As of now, Gimhae and Daegu are the only airports to offer international flights, apart from the country's main Incheon International Airport. Starting in May, airports in Cheongju and Jeju Island will bring back overseas flights, and operations will gradually resume in Gimpo as well. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol inches closer to relocating the top office as the cabinet passed the initial budget needed, but he may not be able to start work from the new venue right away. Lee Kyung-eun explains further.
The cabinet Wednesday passed the initial budget needed for President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol's plan to relocate the presidential office from the secluded Blue House to the Defense Ministry compound in Yongsan in central Seoul. The budget amounts to some $30 million to cover the cost of remodeling the presidential residence and moving the Defense Ministry to the Joint Chiefs of Staff building in the same compound. However, the actual moving will come in phases. Starting with those from floors 5 to 10 in the 10-story building, those below belong to departments associated with the upcoming South Korea-U.S. military exercises, so their move-out is delayed due to concerns over security. That's where the presidential office and other key functions are planned to be located, which inevitably means the move will have to wait until the exercises end on the 28th of April, less than 2 weeks until Yoon takes office.
It is not possible to move the presidential office by Inauguration Day on May 10th, and it will take some time after the inauguration too.
That's why the costs of setting up the presidential office and moving the office of the Presidential Security Service are not covered in this budget. That will require an additional budget in the future, which could also be passed during President Moon Jae-in's term, as the Blue House says it will cooperate on the matter. With all this, Yoon is expected to actually move into Yongsan only after June. In the meantime, he's likely to continue working from his current office here in Dong at the same site as the Transition Committee. The Transition Committee says nearly 1/4 of the massive U.S. military base in Yongsan will be returned to the South Korean government as early as late May, 1 month earlier than planned. They will speed up the project of turning the area into Yongsan Park. Lee Kyung-eun, Arirang News.
The president-elect was briefed by his transition committee on the country's economic forecast. With a decade-high inflation rate, Yoon ordered the team to prioritize stabilizing the livelihoods of the people. He also met with the mayors and governors of regional governments to hear what they need from the incoming administration. Kim Do-yeon has the details.
South Korean President-elect Yoon Suk-yeol on Wednesday called on his transition team to make stabilizing the livelihoods of the people the utmost priority, with South Korea posting a decade-high inflation rate in March of more than 4%.
President-elect Yoon was briefed that various economic indicators and price prospects were gloomy, not only in the first half of this year, but also for the rest of the year, and ordered measures to stabilize people's livelihoods, including prices as the top priority of the new government, despite difficulties at home and abroad.
The president-elect was told by the economy-related leadership of his transition committee that high inflationary pressure around the world as well as supply chain disruption aggravated by the war in Ukraine are adding to the already high consumer prices. The spokesperson added, while the transition team is looking for ways to tackle this issue once Yoon's term starts, the current administration has to come up with measures now. In fact, just the day before, the current government announced its decision to cut fuel tax by 30% starting May until July, something the transition team had suggested about a week ago. In the meantime, Yoon also met with the 17 mayors and governors of the country's top local governments to listen to what they had to say about balanced regional growth.
저는 지역의 발전이 국가 발전이고 이제 지역 균형 발전은 우리가 선택할 수 없는 이제 필수 사항이 이제 됐습니다. 균형 발전은 발전의 속도를 동일하게 맞추는 것이 아니라 모든 지역에 기회를 균등하게 부여하는 것이고 대한민국 국민이 어디에 살던 간에 같은 공정한 기회를 누려야 한다는 것을 의미한다고 저는 생각합니다.
He also called the mayors and governors his partners in running his government and said the national government will listen carefully to what they have to say. Mayor of Busan, Park Hyung-jun, said balanced regional growth is a must for a successful country, but efforts from past governments were not enough.
We sincerely support the Yoon administration to become a government that maximizes the potential of the region by achieving qualitative development in terms of decentralization, balanced development, and innovative growth, and firmly establishing Korea as an advanced country.
In addition, each local district representative gave specific requests to the president-elect, including support in improving transportation, building infrastructure, as well as moving certain government-run corporations outside of the capital region. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
President-elect Yoon met with the German ambassador to Seoul and agreed to upgrade bilateral cooperative ties. Yoon said Germany is South Korea's biggest trading partner in the EU and noted that it's helped in the past with the nation's development economically and scientifically. Mikhail Reifenstahl agreed to cooperate in climate, new and renewable energy, as well as the digital and science sectors. They noted close cooperation in economy, culture, and other areas. The president-elect expressed gratitude for the congratulatory message from German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier. After discussing the situation in Ukraine, both agreed to provide support and play a responsible international role. Chief new envoys of the U.S. and China met in Washington to discuss North Korea. According to the State Department on Tuesday, Sung Kim and Liu Xiaoming discussed denuclearization and ways to encourage the regime to engage in dialogue. Kim condemned Pyongyang's recent ICBM launch and reiterated the importance of a firm response. At the same time, he reaffirmed Washington's willingness for serious and sustained diplomacy with the reclusive state. Ahead of the meeting, the Chinese envoy met the UN ambassadors from South Korea, the U.S. and Russia in New York and discussed Korean Peninsula affairs. The floating Hotel Haegumgang was once a key symbol of inter-Korean reconciliation and economic cooperation, but it appears to be in the final stages of being completely dismantled, and the regime is yet to respond to Seoul's calls for confirmation. Kim Da-mi has the full story.
Seoul has reached out to Pyongyang to confirm whether the floating once South Korean-run Hotel Haegumgang is currently being dismantled by the North. A senior official from South Korea's Unification Ministry said Wednesday that Seoul has asked the North for confirmation through official inter-Korean communication lines, but the North is yet to provide any explanation. But one expert says that the fate of the Mount Kumgang Resort doesn't come as a surprise.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un values the tourism industry highly, which has been suspended for a while due to the pandemic. It's a follow-up of his order at the 8th Party Congress last year to remodel the facilities into the regime's style.
With the advancements made by the North in terms of construction and architecture, the same expert further pointed out that Pyongyang is expected to completely revamp the facilities into a North Korean-style international tourist site. A Unification Ministry official also said that it had contacted Hyundai Asan, which operated the hotel, when the North's dismantling of the hotel was first detected. The company reportedly said it is aware of the situation. Seoul has long argued that such unilateral measures that infringe on South Korea's corporate property rights violate the spirit of the agreement between the two Koreas. Satellite imagery taken by American public earth imaging company Planet Labs on Tuesday showed that the North is in the final stages of demolishing the hotel, with the construction materials piled up in front of the building. In October 2019, Kim Jong-un ordered the removal of the, quote, unpleasant-looking facilities to make way for something that will meet the North's own sentiment and aesthetic taste. The Mount Kumgang Resort was once regarded as a key symbol of inter-Korean reconciliation and economic cooperation. The floating hotel itself mainly hosted South Korean tourists, but has been neglected for over 10 years after tours to Mount Kumgang were halted in 2008. Kim Da-mi, Arirang News.
Fighting continues in Ukraine. Overnight Russian military attacked residential areas of Kharkiv in Borodyanka, northwest of the capital. Hundreds have gone missing or are feared dead following an airstrike on an apartment building. Ji-young is standing by on the line with more. Ji-young, do fill us in.
Daniel, the regional military governor of the eastern Luhansk region, has called on civilians to leave some towns as active battles are taking place in Ukraine's east. Advisor to Ukraine's Ministry of Interior said the key directions where combat will be ongoing would be towards the Donetsk, Kharkiv, and the Luhansk regions. Meanwhile, on Tuesday local time, residential areas of Kharkiv were bombarded with 27 strikes overnight. The head of the Kharkiv Regional Military Administration said, quote, the enemy wants to demoralize us and continues to carry out chaotic attacks on civilian infrastructure. Also, a huge gaping hole can be seen in an apartment building in Borodyanka, a commuter town near Kyiv, and as many as 200 people are missing and presumed dead. There are bodies lying around among the rubble and debris of the collapsed buildings. Local police say it's not known how many people have been killed, but they've been recovering bodies for days. The shelling destroyed at least 4 apartment buildings. Local residents expressed despair after seeing their apartments, once several stories up, collapse down to ground level. Take a listen.
I don't know exactly what happened to that house, but there are people under the debris there. I think something catastrophic happened over there.
This was a child's room. The Russians went through everything they could. They took the child's phone.
Recently, the town had returned to Ukrainian control after Russian troops withdrew. Borodyanka was one of the first places hit by aerial bombardment after the Russian invasion.
And Ji-young, in Brussels, we hear high-ranking NATO foreign ministers have gathered to address Putin's war in Ukraine.
Yes, that's right, Daniel. Their meeting kicked off earlier, and the allies are looking to support Ukraine's right to defend itself. NATO said in a statement that it'll step up its support, which includes anti-tank weapons, air defense systems, as well as additional humanitarian and financial aid. Meanwhile, following the atrocities in Ukraine, the EU has proposed a ban on coal imports from Russia.
The new package includes a ban on coal import. And, ladies and gentlemen, I think that measures on oil and even gas will also be needed sooner or later.
We are also working intensively with our European allies on further sanctions to raise the pressure and raise the cost on Putin and on Russia.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has urged the UN Security Council to remove Russia or dissolve itself and reform its system to strip Russia from its veto. This comes after Zelensky visited Bucha, a town on the outskirts of Kyiv, where after it was returned to Ukrainian control, it was found that at least 300 civilians had been killed. India's ambassador to the United Nations during a UN Security Council meeting on Tuesday also denounced the killings in Bucha, calling the reports deeply disturbing and support an open investigation. Israel's foreign minister also described the killings in Bucha as war crimes. That's all I have for now. Back to you, Daniel.
All right, Ji-young, thank you for those updates. And to help pay for its defense, Ukraine is opening a website to sell an estimated 300 non-fungible tokens it received as donations. NFTs are digital assets, often images that use a blockchain to enable unique ownership. Citing Deputy Minister for Digital Transformation Alex Bornyakov, Bloomberg reported that only 5 to 10% of the NFTs are having significant value. One of them is a CryptoPunk, which is expected to sell for around $200,000. The website will be up sometime this week. The government has also been selling what it calls museum NFTs, which depict scenes from war. The minister said buying the NFTs could be more impactful than donating crypto because they could remind people of what happened in the war. By selling museum NFTs, Ukraine has so far raised $770,000. Inflation has risen considerably this year. Is likely to outpace economic expansion. The ADB cut South Korea's growth forecast to 3% because of the impact of the pandemic and the war in Ukraine. Oh Se-young helps us look beyond the digits.
Inflation in South Korea is expected to outpace the country's economic growth rate this year. The Asia Development Bank's growth outlook on Tuesday projects price levels in the country will rise by 3.2% in 2022. But its gross domestic product is expected to grow by 3%. While South Korea is expected to see consumption recover and its export volume increase, the bank made a 0.1 cut to its previous GDP estimate, citing the rapid spread of Omicron and the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine. These factors are set to add upward pressure to consumer prices, which are likely to stay above 4% after reaching that level in March for the first time in over a decade. As the war in Ukraine hits global food and energy supplies, the Asia Development Bank has cut the overall GDP estimate for 46 Asian economies to 5.2%, while raising inflation to 3.7%. Other risks to the region's recovery include the United States' expected monetary tightening policy, which in the past has triggered a massive capital flight from emerging capital markets, as well as currency depreciation. However, the bank expects the region to stay on the path of economic recovery from the pandemic as domestic demand picks up across Asian countries. Oh-Seong, Arirang News.
When cutting-edge technology from big firms backs up small startups, amazing things can happen. One prime example, an AI-based app that helps the blind through tasks they can find challenging. It's also the first such service to use voice recognition. Kim Hyun-sung tells us more.
An AI helper for the blind.
There is the remote. There is the remote.
Blind people often have trouble carrying out day-to-day tasks alone. Reading bills and documents, finding the remote, recognizing people and images can all be a challenge. But the app Sullivan Plus, developed by a startup called Tuata Corporation, helps the sight-impaired through all these inconveniences using AI technology.
30-year-old Kim Hyun-sung is looking expressless.
When we get some change, we can't tell if the money is 1,000 won or 5,000 won. This app helps tell the money apart, and it also tells us where the mail is from.
The app started from an act of goodwill.
One of the developer's friends became blind, so we designed the service to help out with some of the discomforts this person was feeling.
But with SK Telecom coming on board, the app was taken to the next level.
SK Telecom's Nugu voice recognition is incorporated into the app. So now users don't have to touch the screen, they can just call out to the screen. So it's become much more comfortable to use. It is the world's first visual aid service for the blind that uses voice recognition technology.
아리야, 문자인식 촬영해줘.
Now the app is used by 190,000 users in around 200 countries worldwide. And it's completely free. Sullivan Plus is only one of the many wonders that can be made when big tech is combined with small startups that have big ideas. Late last month, South Korea's three big mobile carriers, SK Telecom, KT, and LGU Plus, pooled together 40 billion Korean won, or more than $32.8 million for a joint fund to support ESG companies. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, and Governance, and ESG companies are those who are in the business of making the world a better place.
Through this fund, we want to invest in building a sustainable environment, bridging the education gap, and caring for the socially vulnerable.
Since mobile carriers use a lot of power, the companies are trying to find an efficient way to reduce the usage. If there's a tech-based startup that can offer a solution, we're hoping to work with them.
Expectations are high as to how big of a positive impact these giant telecom companies can bring to the world. Kim Hyun-sung, Arirang News.
Telstar CEO topped this year's Forbes list with an estimated net worth of $219 billion. In the past year, Elon Musk figures jumped by $69 billion with a rise in his company's share price. More than 40 South Korean tycoons also made the cut. They include Kim Bum-soo, the founder and chairman of Kakao, and Lee Jae-yong, the vice chair of Samsung Electronics, and heir to the tech giant's fortune. According to Forbes, the two richest South Koreans are each worth $9.1 billion, which puts them both in 223rd place.
Warm conditions are in the forecast for much of South Korea tomorrow. Temperatures will be on a rising trend from this point on with lots of sunshine. But for Chungcheongdo and Jeollado provinces, light raindrops will be falling for the morning hours. Expect about 1 millimeter of rainfall. The amount of rain won't be enough to overcome the exceptional dryness. In fact, dry conditions are intensifying, with alerts expanded to more regions. Dry weather advisories are issued for many parts of inland regions, including here in Seoul. Forest fire precaution levels have been raised to the 3rd level, which is in the severe category. Please be careful with anything that can start a fire. Morning lows will range from 5 to 11 degrees Celsius nationwide. Seoul will start off at 7 degrees. And sunny conditions will dominate for the daytime. Seoul will get up to 15 degrees. Daejeon 19, Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 20 degrees. This weekend is forecast to be warm and mild, with temperatures surpassing the seasonal norms. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
Time to wrap things up. Thank you for watching.